Millionaire went for a walk and found his missing mother sleeping on the street. David Thompson slammed the door behind him after yet another explosive argument with Jennifer. His wife insisted they should visit his mother, whom they hadn't seen in 5 years, but he refused point blank to revisit that subject. Walking through the streets of downtown New York City to cool off, David turned a corner near his business building when his heart stopped. There, curled up on a park bench with dirty, torn blankets, was an elderly woman with grey hair whom he recognized immediately. "Mom?" he whispered, unable to believe his eyes. Mrs. Margaret slowly opened her eyes and, upon seeing him, tried to shrink further into the blankets. Her eyes, which had once shone with pride when he graduated in business, now avoided her son's gaze in shame. "David," she murmured, attempting to stand quickly. I was just... Mom, what are you doing here?" David stepped closer, his legs trembling. "Where have you been all this time?" Margaret tried to walk away, but he gently held her arm. She was so thin, so fragile. How had his mother, who had always been so strong, ended up like this? "Don't touch me, David," she said softly. "You can't be seen with me like this." "What do you mean? You're my mother." "I was. Now I'm just another old woman on the streets." Margaret lowered her head. "You have your life, your company, your beautiful wife. You don't need to worry about me." David felt the world spin. It had been 5 years since he last spoke to his mother, since that terrible fight where he told her she was nothing but a burden. Since then, he'd sent money to her account every month, but never sought her out in person. "Mom, I always sent the money. How did you—" "What money?" Margaret looked at him, confused. "I never received anything from you." David's mind raced. He had always sent $3,000 monthly to his mother's account through his secretary, Amanda. How had she not gotten it? "How long have you been like this?" he asked, swallowing hard. 3 years, Margaret answered, adjusting her blanket. "I lost the house when I couldn't pay the hospital bills after my surgery." David vaguely remembered Amanda mentioning something about his mother calling a few times, but he had given strict orders not to be bothered with family matters. "Did you try to reach me?" "Many times, but your security never let me upstairs. They said you ordered no relatives asking for money to be allowed in." The words hit David like a punch to the gut. He had indeed given that order years ago, tired of distant cousins showing up looking for loans. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. "Mom, I didn't know. I'll fix this right now." David reached for his phone, but Margaret held his hand. "It's too late, son. I've learned to live with dignity here on the streets. I have my friends, my little spot. I don't want anything from you anymore." "What do you mean you don't want anything? You're my mother. I'm taking you home right now." "Your home isn't mine." Margaret stood slowly. "And I have responsibilities here." "What responsibilities could a 70-year-old have on the streets?" Margaret pointed to a group further down the park. David saw an elderly man, a middle-aged woman with a small child, and 2 young adults who looked barely out of their teens. "They depend on me. I help get food, medicine. I teach the children to read. I care for the sick." David stared at his mother in disbelief. Even on the streets, she was still the same woman who had always taken care of everyone around her. "Mom, please, let me help. There's a 5-star hotel 2 blocks from here. Let's go." "No," Margaret was firm. "I won't abandon these people, and you can't buy me with luxury hotels." The resolve in her voice brought back childhood memories when Margaret worked 3 jobs to keep the house running after David's father left them. "At least let me give you some money. Buy food. If you want to help, help all of us or don't help anyone." Margaret crossed her arms. "I won't accept charity just for myself." David stayed silent for a moment, watching the woman who had once been his greatest source of strength and inspiration. How had he become so selfish? "All right, I'll help everyone, but you need to get off the streets, Mum." "I don't need to. I chose to be here." "Chose?" Margaret took a deep breath and sat back down on the bench. 3 years ago, when I lost the house, I had 2 options: go to a public shelter or try to survive out here. I chose the streets because here I can still be useful to someone. You could have looked for me. I did. Margaret raised her voice for the first time. I called, went to your office, sent letters, but you were always too busy with your $1 million business to see your old mother. David felt tears burning his eyes. He remembered the times Amanda had told him someone from the family had called, but he'd always asked her to handle it, never bothering to ask who it was. Mom, Forget it, David. What's done is done. Margaret stood up again. Now, I have to go. Mr. Richard has a fever, and I need to take care of him. Who's Mr. Richard? One of my friends, a former accountant who lost everything after his daughter stole all his savings. David watched his mother walk toward the group of people. She moved slowly, but with determination. Even physically weakened, she held the same proud posture as always. He followed from a distance and saw how warmly she was received by the group. Everyone treated her with affection and respect. A young woman ran to hug her, and David heard her shout, "Mrs. Margaret is here," as if announcing the arrival of someone very important. He watched for over an hour as his mother tended to an elderly man with a bad cough, organized the distribution of food donated by local merchants, and helped a child with homework using an old notebook and a short pencil. When he finally decided to approach the group, everyone eyed him with suspicion. David realized how his expensive clothes and demeanor clashed with the surroundings. "He's my son," Margaret explained to the others. "The businessman I always told you about." "The one who never visited you?" the young woman asked bluntly. David swallowed hard. Apparently, his mother still talked about him to her street friends, even after everything. "Ashley, be polite," Margaret scolded the girl. "David, this is Ashley. She's 22 and finishing high school. She studies in the morning and works in the afternoon." "I collect recyclables," Ashley added, lifting her chin proudly. "Mrs. Margaret taught me there's no shame in honest work." David spent the rest of the afternoon getting to know each member of that makeshift group. Mr. Richard, who had been an accountant for 40 years. Jason, 19, who left home after his stepfather kicked him out for being gay. Dorothy, 45, who ended up on the streets after suffering domestic violence and fleeing with her young daughter, Emma, just 7 years old. Each story was more heartbreaking than the last, and in all of them, Margaret appeared as a maternal figure offering comfort, advice, and even her own meals when someone was in greater need. As the sun began to set, David approached his mother again. "Mum, at least let me take you out to dinner somewhere decent. We're having dinner right here. Dorothy made a delicious soup today." "Mom!" "David, either you eat with all of us, or you leave. I won't abandon my family to eat at a fancy restaurant." The word family stung David. Those people were more of a family to his mother than he had been in recent years. "All right, can I have dinner here?" Margaret smiled for the first time since he'd found her. "Of course, but you'll have to sit on the floor like everyone else." David took off his expensive jacket and sat on the cardboard beside his mother. The soup was truly delicious, and he realized it had been a long time since he'd had such a tasty meal. During dinner, he listened to funny stories about the group's adventures on the streets of New York City. Margaret told him about the time they helped a lost tourist find his hotel, and the man was so grateful he came back the next day with meals for everyone. "We may not have much," said Mr. Richard, "but we always find a way to help someone. Mrs. Margaret always says wealth isn't about what we have, but what we do for others," added Ashley. David looked at his mother, who glanced away, embarrassed. They were the same words she used to say when he was a child, words he'd long forgotten. When the conversation naturally died down, David stood to leave. "Mom, at least let me give you my phone number. If you need anything." "I don't have a phone, David." "Then let me give you money to buy one." "I don't need a phone. If it's urgent, Ashley has a cell." Ashley held up an old, scratched phone that still worked. "I can write your number down," she offered. David recited his number and said goodbye to everyone. He hugged his mother, who resisted at first, but then returned the affection. "Can I come back tomorrow?" "If you want," Margaret replied, "but don't bring expensive gifts. If you bring anything, make sure it's for everyone." On the way home, David couldn't stop thinking about everything he'd learned. His mother had been living on the streets for 3 years, and he'd never known because he'd blindly trusted his secretary. When he got home, Jennifer was watching TV in the living room. "Where were you? You left for a walk and were gone over 5 hours." David sat beside his wife, still processing everything. "Jennifer, I found my mother." "What do you mean, found? Was she lost?" "She's been living on the streets for 3 years." Jennifer turned off the TV and faced her husband. "What do you mean, living on the streets? Don't you send her money every month?" "I do, but apparently she never received it." "That's impossible. You always showed me the transfer receipts." David rushed to his office and grabbed the folders where he kept his bank records. Reviewing them carefully, he discovered all the deposits had been made to an account under the name Margaret Thompson Miller, but the account number was different from the one he'd noted as his mother's. "Jennifer, do you recognize this account?" He showed her the papers. "Never seen it. Amanda handles those transfers, doesn't she?" David's blood ran cold. Amanda had access to all his bank accounts and knew his passwords. If she wanted, she could easily create a fake account and divert the money. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. "I'm calling her right now." David grabbed the phone. "David, it's almost 11 at night." "I don't care," Amanda answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy. "Hello? Mr. David? Is something wrong?" "Amanda, I need you to come to my house now. It's urgent." "Now?" "But sir." "Now, Amanda. It's about my mother." Silence on the other end. "Your mother? But you said you didn't want to talk about her anymore." "Either you come here or I go to your house. Choose." "All right, sir. I'll be there in half an hour." David hung up the phone with his hands shaking in anger. Jennifer watched him worriedly. "Do you really think she stole the money?" "I hope not. But if she did, she'll pay back every last cent." Amanda arrived in 20 minutes, visibly nervous. She was a 45-year-old woman who had worked for David for over 10 years. She had always been efficient and discreet, which was why he trusted her so much. "Sit down, Amanda." David pointed to the armchair. "I need to understand something about the transfers I make to my mother." "What kind of thing, sir?" David showed her the bank statements. "This account here, under the name Margaret Thompson Miller. Is it my mother's?" Amanda looked at the papers and turned visibly pale. "Sir, I can explain." "Then explain." "The account is mine," she admitted quietly. "I opened it in my mother's name." "Your mother's name is Margaret Thompson Miller." "Miller is her maiden name. Thompson is my ex-husband's last name." David abruptly stood up from his chair. "So you've been stealing from me for 5 years?" "It's not stealing," Amanda defended herself. "You said you didn't want to talk to your mother anymore, that she only caused trouble in your life. I thought I was doing you a favor by keeping the money." "Keeping it? Where is the money, Amanda?" I used it to pay my family's debts. My son had a drug problem. He needed treatment. $200,000, Amanda. You stole $200,000 from me." Jennifer did the math in her head and was shocked by the amount. "But sir, you said yourself you didn't want anything to do with your mother." "I said I didn't want to be bothered with money requests. I never told you to steal the money meant for her." Amanda began to cry. "Mr. David, I can pay it all back. I'll sell my house, my car." "You will pay it back, and you'll pay it back with interest." David picked up the phone. "And now I'm going to find out what else you've been doing with my money." "Please, sir, I have a family." "My mother had a family too. She had me, but I was too busy to notice you were stealing from her." Jennifer stepped closer to her husband. "David, maybe we should talk about this tomorrow, when we're calmer." "Calmer?" David looked at his wife in disbelief. "My mother has been sleeping on a park bench for 3 years because this woman stole the money I sent her. Mr. David, I swear I didn't know she was on the streets. If I had known..." "If you had known what? Would you have stolen less?" David paced the room, trying to calm down. His mind was racing, thinking of everything he could have avoided if he hadn't been so negligent. "Amanda, you're fired. I want you out of the company by tomorrow, and I want a repayment plan for every cent you stole." "Sir, please, get out of my house now." After Amanda left, David collapsed onto the couch with his head in his hands. How could I be so stupid, Jennifer? How did I trust someone so much that I didn't even check if my own mother was getting the money? You trusted an employee who worked with us for 10 years without any issues. I was negligent. I abandoned my mother twice, first emotionally, then financially, without even knowing it. Jennifer sat beside her husband. So now what? What are you going to do? I'm going to pick up my mother first thing tomorrow and bring her home. David, you can't just force her off the streets if she doesn't want to. Of course I can, I'm her son. Being her son doesn't give you the right to decide her life, David. You said yourself she chose to stay there to help others. David knew his wife was right, but the guilt he felt was so overwhelming that he needed to do something to make up for the years of neglect. The next morning, he woke up early and went straight to the square where he had left his mother the night before. He brought breakfast for everyone. Bread, fruit, juice, and hot coffee in a thermos. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted the group. "Hey, Dr. David." Mr. Richard waved. "What a surprise to see you here so early." "I brought breakfast for everyone." Ashley clapped excitedly. "That's so nice, Mrs. Margaret, your son is really something." David looked around for his mother, but didn't see her. "Where's my mom?" "She left early with Dorothy," Jason replied. "They went to collect recyclables near the office district. They won't be back until late afternoon." "Collecting recyclables?" David couldn't believe it. "She's picking through trash." "Recyclables, Doctor," Mr. Richard corrected. "And it's not just her. We all do our part to earn some income. Mrs. Margaret sells the most because she sorts everything carefully and bargains well with buyers." David handed out breakfast, trying to process the information. His mother, at 70 years old, was collecting recyclables to survive while he lived in a mansion and drove imported cars. "Can I wait for her to come back?" "Of course, Doctor, but she won't be back until around 5. David decided to return to the company to deal with Amanda. He needed to officially fire her and start auditing all the accounts to see if there were other discrepancies. When he arrived at the office, he found Amanda packing her things into a box. "Mr. David, I wanted to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about, Amanda. I just want to know when you'll start paying the money back." "That's what I wanted to discuss. I did the math. With the value of my house and car, I can return about $150,000. The rest? The rest what?" "I don't have a way to pay it back, sir. I spent it on my son's treatment. Family debts." David felt anger rising again. "You spent my money, my mother's money, on your family? Sir, please understand my situation." "Your situation? What about my mother's situation, living on the streets for 3 years?" "I didn't know." "Because you never cared to find out. You saw a chance to steal and you took it." Amanda started crying again, but David was determined not to soften. "You have 2 options, Amanda. Either you find a way to return every cent, or I sue you for embezzlement. And you can explain to a judge how you spent $200,000 that weren't yours. Mr. David, I have children, and I have a mother who's picking through trash because of you." David stormed out, slamming the door. He told the legal department to prepare all the paperwork to sue Amanda if she didn't return the full amount. By late afternoon, he returned to the square. Margaret had already come back and was counting money with Dorothy. "Hi, Mom." "David, what are you doing here again?" "I wanted to talk to you. It's important." Margaret finished counting the money and put it in an old tin can. "Then speak." "Mom, I found out what happened to the money I sent you. My secretary was stealing it." Margaret looked at her son without surprise. "I figured it was something like that." "What do you mean you figured?" "David, son, you've always been a good boy, but you'd never ignore someone in need. When the money stopped coming, I knew you weren't aware." "Then why didn't you try harder to reach me?" "I tried as much as I could. After your security turned me away multiple times, I understood you really didn't want contact with me." David sat beside his mother on the bench. "Mom, forgive me. I was a terrible son." "You were a busy son. There's a difference." "There's no difference at all. I abandoned you." Margaret took her son's hand. "David, you didn't abandon me. You grew up, built your family, made your own life. It was natural for him to distance himself. It wasn't natural for me to let you go without. Son, I was never without. I faced hardships, which is different. How is it different? You're living on the street. I'm living on the street because I chose to. After I lost the house, I could have gone to a nursing home or stayed with distant relatives. But here in this square, I found a family that needs me. David looked around and saw how all the square's residents acted naturally around his mother. It was as if she were truly the matriarch of that makeshift community. "Mom, but you can't stay here forever." "Why can't I?" "Because you're 70, because it's getting cold, because this isn't a life for someone your age." "David, age is just a number. I still have the strength to work, to help these people, to be useful. Why would I trade that for sitting alone in an apartment watching TV?" David had never thought of it that way. To him, comfort meant a soft bed, air conditioning, food on the table. To his mother, comfort seemed to mean having people around, having a purpose. "At least let me rent a house for you all, for everyone." "A house where, David?" "I don't know, anywhere. A big house where everyone can live with dignity." Margaret smiled. "And who's going to pay the bills for that house? The water, electricity, gas, food for 8 people? I'll pay for everything." "And what if one day you get tired of paying? If your wife doesn't agree with the expense? If you run into financial trouble?" David hadn't considered those possibilities. "That won't happen, Mom. Son, you're 42. I'm 70. Do you think I'll depend on you for the next 20 years of my life?" "Why not?" "Because I raised you to be independent, not to be my crutch." The conversation was interrupted by Ashley's arrival, running and shouting. "Mrs. Margaret! Mrs. Margaret! Emma isn't feeling well." Margaret quickly stood up and ran toward the spot where Dorothy usually stayed with her daughter. David followed. Emma, the 7-year-old girl, was lying on a tarp, very pale and with a high fever. Dorothy was crying desperately beside her. "She was playing normally an hour ago," Dorothy explained. "Suddenly she started feeling sick, and now she's like this." Margaret touched the child's forehead. "She has a very high fever. She needs to go to the hospital." "But I don't have money for a private hospital, and at the public clinic, it'll take hours to be seen." David stepped forward. "I'll take you to the private hospital right now. My car is over there." "Mr. David, would you really do that?" Dorothy looked at him hopefully. "Of course. Let's go. There's no time to waste." David carried Emma to the car while Margaret and Dorothy settled in the back. On the way to the hospital, the girl started convulsing. "David, faster!" Margaret shouted. "I'm going as fast as I can." When they arrived, David used all his influence to get Emma seen immediately. The doctors took her to the emergency room and began running tests. During the wait, David watched as his mother comforted Dorothy, who was beside herself. Margaret held the woman's hands and repeated words of reassurance, promising everything would be okay. "She'll be fine, Dorothy. She's a strong child." "But what if she isn't, Mrs. Margaret? She's all I have in this world." "She will be. And even if something happens, you're not alone. We're your family." David felt a lump in his throat hearing those words. When was the last time he had offered someone that kind of emotional support? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 3 hours later, the doctor came out of the emergency room. "The girl is stable. It was a severe bacterial infection, but we managed to control it with antibiotics. She'll need to stay hospitalized for a few days." Dorothy broke down in tears of relief. "Can I see her?" "Of course. She's awake and asking for her mother." After Dorothy entered the room, David approached his mother. "Mum, who's going to pay the hospital bill?" "That's your problem, son. You're the one who offered to help." "I know, I was just asking." "David, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "What you did today for Emma was very kind. But did you do it because I was there? Or would you have done it even if you were alone?" David thought about the question for a moment. "Honestly, I don't think I would have. I probably wouldn't even have noticed she was sick." "Why?" "Because I live in a bubble, Mom. I only think about my problems, my work, my money." "And when did you start living in that bubble?" David reflected on the question. When had he truly begun to care only about himself? "I think it was after I made my first million. I started believing money could solve everything, and that I didn't need to worry about anything else. And does it? No. Money didn't bring you back to me. It didn't stop me from becoming a bad person. Margaret took her son's hand. You're not a bad person, David. You just lost your way. How can I find my way back? By starting to see the people around you. By caring about problems that aren't your own. David spent the entire night at the hospital. Dorothy slept in the chair next to her daughter's bed. Margaret slept on the waiting room sofa, and he wandered the halls, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 2 days. In the morning, when Emma woke up, she looked at David and asked, "Who are you?" "I'm a friend of your mum's." "Did you bring us to the hospital?" "I did." "Thank you so much," she said with a weak smile. That "thank you so much" from a 7-year-old touched David in a way he hadn't expected. When was the last time someone had sincerely thanked him for something he'd done? Throughout the day, all the residents of the square came to visit Emma. David noticed how they'd organized themselves to bring flowers picked from the street, drawings made on wrapping paper, small improvised gifts. They were a real family, not bound by blood, but by mutual care. "Mum, can I talk to you in private?" Margaret followed David into the hospital hallway. "I want to help you, all of you, but not the way I thought before." "What do you mean?" "I don't just want to give money or buy a house. I want to understand how I can really help." "And how do you plan to figure that out?" "By spending time with you, getting to know each person, understanding their needs." Margaret looked at her son with an expression he couldn't decipher. "David, are you sure about what you're saying? You have a business to run, a wife. The business can manage without me for a few days, and Jennifer, and, well, maybe it's time for her to see this part of my life too. You want to bring your wife to meet the homeless? I want her to meet my mother, and I want her to understand why this matters to me." Margaret was silent for a moment. "Son, your wife won't like this. Then maybe it's time to find out who she really is." That afternoon, after Emma was discharged from the hospital, David took everyone back to the square. He was surprised to see someone had gone through their things while they were gone. "Did someone steal anything?" he asked. "No," Mr. Richard replied. "Actually, someone left things, food, new blankets, medicine for my cough." "Who?" "We don't know, but it happens sometimes. There are good people out there who help without wanting recognition." David was intrigued by this. Who were these people helping anonymously? "Mum, do you know who these people are?" "I know some of them. There's Mrs. Johnson, who has a restaurant on the corner. She always brings leftover food. There's Dr. Wilson, a retired doctor who sometimes comes here to check if anyone is sick. And they don't charge anything. Nothing. They do it because they want to help." David began to realize there was a network of solidarity around that square he had never noticed before. Ordinary people who dedicated part of their time and resources to help those in need. That night, as he was saying goodbye to go home, Ashley approached him. "Dr. David, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Ashley. Are you really going to keep coming here?" "I am." "Why?" "It's just that sometimes wealthy people show up here, feel sorry for us for a few days, but then disappear and never come back." Ashley's observation made him reflect. Was he just another rich guy feeling temporarily guilty? "Ashley, I promise I won't disappear. You're my mom's family, so you're my family too." "Really?" "Really." Ashley smiled and hugged him. "Then you're my Uncle David." The hug from that 22-year-old girl he had met just 2 days ago touched David deeply. When was the last time someone had hugged him without wanting anything in return? When he got home, he found Jennifer in the living room watching TV. "How was your day, honey?" "Different." David sat next to his wife. "Jennifer, I need to tell you some things about my mom." "Of course. How is she?" David told her about Emma, about the hospital, about how his mother cared for all those people. Jennifer listened quietly, without judgment. "And now what do you plan to do?" "I want to keep visiting her. I want to understand better how I can help." "David, are you sure you're not just feeling guilty and trying to make up for everything at once?" Jennifer's question was valid. Was it just guilt? Maybe it is guilt. But so what? If guilt makes me a better person, what's the problem? The problem is that guilt fades. And when it does, you might abandon those people again. I won't abandon them, Jennifer. How can you be sure? Because for the first time in years, I felt useful to someone. When I carried Emma to the hospital, when I saw Dorothy's relief, when I heard the girls thank you, I remembered how good it feels to help someone. Jennifer was silent for a moment. David, can I tell you something you might not like to hear? Go ahead. I always knew you were generous. When we first met, you were always helping people around you. But after you started making a lot of money, you changed. What do you mean changed? You started thinking everyone wanted to take advantage of you. You became distrustful, closed off. You stopped trusting people. David had never noticed this change in himself. And you never told me this? I did many times, but you always said I didn't understand how hard it was to deal with opportunistic people. And you agreed with that? At first, no. But after seeing so many people actually trying to take advantage of you, I ended up agreeing it was better to keep our distance. David realized both he and Jennifer had isolated themselves from the real world. Jennifer, would you like to meet my mom? Of course, I've always wanted to meet her. And her friends? Jennifer hesitated for a moment. The homeless people? They're people, Jennifer. People with stories, dreams, problems, just like any of us. I know, David, it's just, I've never been around people in that situation. Neither had I. But I'm learning they have a lot to teach. Like what? Like how to be a real family, like how to care for each other, like how to be happy even without much. Jennifer reflected on her husband's words. Okay, I'll go with you tomorrow. Are you sure? I am. But David, I don't want you to do this just out of guilt. If you really want to help these people, it has to be out of love, not obligation. How do I know the difference? When it's out of love, you won't think twice before helping. It'll come naturally. The next morning, David woke up early and prepared a special breakfast to take to the square. Jennifer helped him pack fruit, bread, juice, and even baked a cake. Are you nervous? David asked as they loaded the car. A little. I don't know how they'll receive me. They're just regular people, Jennifer. They've just faced different struggles than ours. When they arrived at the square, David noticed more people than usual. Besides the regular group, others were talking to his mother. Mom, what's going on? David, I'm so glad you came. These are some of the people I mentioned yesterday. They brought donations. David was introduced to Mrs. Mary, the restaurant owner, Dr. Wilson, the retired doctor, and 3 others who regularly helped the square's residents. And this is my wife, Jennifer, David introduced. Jennifer greeted everyone politely, but David could tell she was uncomfortable. Mrs. Margaret, Mrs. Mary said, I brought some leftovers from yesterday's lunch. They're still good. Thank you so much, Mrs. Mary. You're always such an angel. Don't mention it. It's just food that would have gone to waste anyway. David watched the interaction and noticed an unspoken rule here. People helped, but always discreetly, without drawing attention. After the donors left, Margaret approached Jennifer. So, you're my daughter-in-law? Yes, Mrs. Margaret. It's a pleasure to meet you. The pleasure is mine. David always talked about you when he was younger. He did? Oh, yes. He said you were the most beautiful and intelligent woman he'd ever met. Jennifer looked at David in surprise. It had been years since he'd spoken so affectionately about her. He also talked a lot about you, always with so much love. Did he really? Margaret glanced at her son. Funny, lately it seemed like I only got in his way. The conversation grew awkward. David realized both his mother and wife were hurt by him, though for different reasons. Jennifer, want to meet the others? He tried changing the subject. Jennifer spent the morning talking to each resident. David watched her grow more comfortable, especially with Emma, who adored her. Aunt Jennifer, do you have kids? The girl asked. No, sweetheart. Why not? Jennifer looked at David, who averted his gaze. It was a sensitive topic. They'd tried for years to have children but couldn't, eventually accepting they wouldn't be parents. Sometimes things don't happen the way we want, Jennifer replied diplomatically. But did you want kids? Very much. Then you can be my heart aunt. Jennifer felt tears welling up. I'd love to be your heart aunt. David watched his wife's emotion and felt his heart tighten. How long had it been since they'd talked about children, about dreams and desires? As they were leaving, Jennifer pulled David aside. David, can I tell you something? Of course. These people, they're amazing. They really are. Your mother is an extraordinary woman. How does she manage to care for so many? I think she was born for it. She's always been this way. And you? How do you plan to help them? I'm still thinking. I don't want to just throw money at it and fix things superficially. Do you want a suggestion? I do. What if we bought a big house and offered it to them? Not as charity, but as a partnership. A partnership. How so? They take care of the house, do some income-generating activities, and we help with the expenses. Everyone contributes what they can. David was surprised by his wife's idea. You came up with that quickly. Actually, I kept thinking about the conversation we had yesterday. And today, talking to them, I realized what they want most is dignity, not charity. Jennifer, you surprise me. Why? Because you understood in one morning what took me 2 days to realize. Jennifer smiled. Sometimes you need an outside perspective to see things clearly. That afternoon, David and Jennifer went house hunting in the area. They wanted something close to downtown, so everyone could keep up with their activities and routines, but that also offered more comfort and safety. They found an old 2-story house with 7 bedrooms, being sold for a reasonable price. The house needed some renovations, but had the potential to shelter the whole family from the square. What do you think? David asked his wife. I think it's perfect. There's space for everyone, a big backyard where the kids can play, and it's close to everything. So, should we buy it? Let's. But first, we have to talk to them. We can't just show up with a ready-made house and expect them to accept it. David agreed. Jennifer was right. Any decision should be made together. The next day, they returned to the square with the proposal. They gathered all the residents and explained the idea. Everyone, David began, Jennifer and I found a house that could work for all of you to live in, but we want to hear everyone's opinion first. What kind of house? Asked Mr. Richard. A big house, with rooms for everyone, a kitchen, bathrooms, a backyard, close by. And what would the cost be for us? Asked Jason, skeptical. That's the thing, Jennifer chimed in. We want to make this a partnership. You take care of the house, organize some income-generating activities, and we'll help with the basic expenses. What kind of activities? Asked Ashley. That's up to you. It could be a thrift store, selling food, offering services, whatever you know how to do and want to do. Margaret, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. What if you change your mind? If one day you decide you don't want to keep this partnership anymore? Mom, that won't happen. David, nothing in life is guaranteed. You could have financial trouble, get tired. Your wife might not agree anymore. Jennifer stepped closer to Margaret. Mrs. Margaret, you're right to be cautious. But I can promise one thing. If I change my mind about helping you in just one morning, it was for the better, not worse. How so? When David told me he'd found you on the street, my first thought was that it would complicate our lives. But after meeting you, I realized you're the ones who'll improve our lives. In what way? You reminded us of what really matters. Family, mutual care, generosity. Things we forgot in the middle of all our comfort. Margaret looked at the other residents. Everyone, what do you think? I think it's worth trying, said Dorothy. For Emma's sake. She needs a better place to live. I agree, Ashley nodded. But it has to be democratic. Everyone has to agree on the rules. Of course, David confirmed. You decide the house rules. We'll just help with what's needed. Mr. Richard raised his hand. What if someone doesn't adjust? If there are conflicts? Then you work it out among yourselves, Margaret answered. The same way we do here in the square. Jason, the youngest and sometimes the most skeptical, asked, Dr. David, why do you want to do this? What's in it for you? David took a moment to think of his answer. Jason, my mother taught me to be generous when I was a child, but I forgot that over the years. Meeting all of you reminded me of who I really am. And what about you, Mrs. Jennifer? Jason turned to her. I always wanted a big family, children, grandchildren, a full house. Since we couldn't have children, we ended up isolating ourselves. You could be the family I always dreamed of having. Jennifer's response touched everyone. Margaret stepped closer to her daughter-in-law and hugged her. Then it's decided, Margaret declared. We'll accept the offer, but with one condition. What? David asked. If one day you want to get rid of us, give us at least 3 months' notice to find another place. Mom, that's not going to happen. David, let me finish, Margaret interrupted. And if one day we want to leave, we'll also give 3 months' notice. It has to work both ways. I agree, Jennifer said immediately. Then let's go see this house. Margaret smiled. The visit to the house was emotional. Each resident chose their room, planned how to arrange the shared spaces, and discussed the house rules. Emma was enchanted by the backyard. Can I plant flowers here, Aunt Jennifer? You can plant whatever you want, sweetheart. And can I have a puppy? Jennifer looked at David, who nodded. Yes, you can. The girls squealed with joy and ran around the yard. She's never had a backyard to play in, Dorothy explained. We've always lived in small apartments or on the streets. Over the next 2 weeks, David and Jennifer threw themselves into renovating the house. They hired builders, electricians, and plumbers, but always consulted the future residents on every decision. What color do you want for the living room? Jennifer asked. Something cheerful, Ashley suggested. Light yellow. And the kitchen? Blue, said Margaret. I've always dreamed of a blue kitchen. David watched Jennifer pour her heart into every detail of the renovation. He hadn't seen her this excited about anything in years. You're happy, he remarked one night as they headed home. I am, she confirmed. Happier than I've been in a long time. Why? Because I finally feel like our life has a greater purpose than just making money and spending it on things we don't need. Do you regret marrying me? The question caught Jennifer off guard. Why are you asking that? Because I realized that over the years I became a selfish person. You deserved a better husband. David, you didn't become selfish. You lost your way. There's a difference. What difference? Selfish people don't change. People who've lost their way can find it again. And you think I've found mine? I think you're on the right path. That night, David and Jennifer talked late into the night about the dreams they'd abandoned, the family they'd always wanted, and the mistakes they'd made in their marriage. Jennifer, do you still want children? At this point? She laughed. David, I'm 38. So? There's still time. There is, but are we really ready to be parents now? I don't think anyone's ever 100% ready, but maybe we're mature enough to understand what really matters. Do you really want to try for kids? I do. But if we can't, we already have a family. The family from the park? The family from the park. Jennifer smiled and nestled closer to her husband. David, can I tell you a secret? Of course. When I saw you taking care of Emma at the hospital, I fell in love with you all over again. Why? Because I remembered the man who made me marry you. The generous, caring man who truly cared about people. I fell in love with you again too, David admitted. When? When I saw how you treated every person from the park with kindness and respect, without judgment. They kissed like they hadn't in years. On moving day, the entire neighborhood around the square came together to help. Mrs. Johnson brought food for all the movers. Dr. Wilson offered his car for transportation, and others showed up spontaneously to lend a hand. David was moved to see how the community united to support the group's move. Mom, you've made so many friends here. Son, when you treat people well, they return the favor. It's as simple as that. Why did it take me so long to learn that? Because you had to lose yourself to find yourself. The move was completed in a single day. Once everyone was settled in the new house, Margaret asked to say a few words. Everyone, I want to tell you something. 3 years ago, when I first arrived at that square, I thought my life was over, that I was no longer good for anything. The room fell silent. But you showed me that life can begin again at any age, that we can build a family even without blood ties, that we can be happy even without having much. Margaret looked at David and Jennifer. And now my children have given me the chance to live this family life in a dignified place. But I don't want you to think we depend on them. We'll do our part. We'll contribute. We'll prove we deserve this opportunity. How will we do that, Mrs. Margaret? Ashley asked. Starting tomorrow, we'll organize our cooperative. Everyone contributes what they know best. Ashley has a knack for sales. Jason can fix things, Mr. Richard understands business. Dorothy cooks wonderfully. I can sew and care for people. And I can help with homework, Emma added, making everyone laugh. Exactly, Margaret smiled. We all have something to give. David stepped closer to his mother. Mum, can I be part of this cooperative? But you already have your company. I can do both. I can dedicate a few hours a week to help. Me too, Jennifer offered. I studied education before getting married. I can tutor the neighborhood kids. The idea of turning the house into a community center excited everyone. In the following days, they put their plans into action. Ashley organized a thrift sale in the backyard, selling clothes donated by neighbors. Jason opened a small repair workshop. Dorothy started selling lunchboxes to local workers. Margaret offered sewing services and minor clothing repairs. Jennifer set up a tutoring space in the living room, where she welcomed neighborhood children in the afternoons. David began dedicating 3 afternoons a week to help with business planning and management. Within 2 months, the cooperative was already generating enough income to cover the house's basic expenses. David and Jennifer still helped with extra costs, but the group had achieved financial independence. Mom, I'm proud of you all, David said one afternoon, watching the activity in the house. Proud of what? Because you proved you didn't need charity. You needed opportunity. Son, that's always been the difference between giving a fish and teaching how to fish. What do you mean? If you had just given me money every month, I'd have stayed dependent. But by giving me the chance to rebuild my life, you gave me back my dignity. David realized his mother was right. True help wasn't just financial, it was emotional and social too. That night, when he got home, David found Jennifer looking over some papers on the kitchen table. What are those? Test results, she replied without looking up. What tests? I went to the doctor last week for a checkup. David's chest tightened. Is something wrong? Jennifer looked up and smiled. I'm pregnant, David. David stood in shock for a few seconds, unable to process the information. Pregnant? How? The traditional way, Jennifer laughed. Apparently, when we reconnected emotionally, our bodies did too. David hugged his wife and began to cry. I can't believe it. After so many years of trying, neither can I, Jennifer sobbed with him. The doctor said emotional stress can sometimes affect fertility. When we relaxed and became happy again, nature took care of the rest, David finished. They held each other for a long time, crying with joy. Jennifer, do you think being parents now with this new life we're building? I think it's the perfect time, she interrupted. Our child will grow up in an environment where they learn that family isn't just blood, that generosity is more important than money, that being useful matters more than being rich. Do you think we'll be good parents? We have the best school in the world right at your mum's house. Every day we see examples of care, patience, unconditional love. That's true. They'll be the best aunts and grandparents a child could have. The next morning, David and Jennifer went to share the news with their cooperative family. The reaction was pure celebration. A baby! Emma shouted excitedly. I'm gonna have a little cousin. It'll be the first baby in our family, Margaret said, moved. Mrs. Jennifer, would you like me to help make the baby's layette? Margaret offered. I know how to sew baby clothes. I'd love that, Mrs. Margaret. Ashley walked up to David. Uncle David, can I be the godmother? Of course you can. Jason chimed in, and can I be the godfather? You can all be godparents, Jennifer said. This child will have many godfathers and godmothers. The pregnancy news brought even more unity to the group. Everyone got involved in preparations for the baby's arrival, each contributing what they could. Margaret and Dorothy started knitting little clothes. Ashley organized a community baby shower. Jason refurbished an old crib they found at a thrift store. Mr. Richard calculated all the expenses and helped David plan their expanded family budget. Emma, who was 8 years old, declared herself the baby's official helper. "Aunt Jennifer, I'll teach them how to walk, talk, and play," she listed eagerly. "What if it's a girl?" Jennifer asked. "Then I'll teach her too. Boy or girl, it doesn't matter." During the pregnancy, David had time to reflect on all the changes in his life over the past months. From a businessman focused solely on profit, he'd become a man concerned with his community's well-being. "Jennifer, sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming." "Why?" "Because 6 months ago, our lives were completely different. We barely talked, you were depressed, I was empty inside, and now we have a huge family, a purpose, a baby on the way," she finished. "How did everything change so fast?" "I think things were ready to change, David. They just needed a little push." "Was the push finding my mom on the street?" "The push was you deciding to stop and help, instead of just walking past like before." David agreed. How many times had he walked past people on the street without caring? How many chances to make a difference had he missed because he was always in a hurry, always focused on his own problems? In the 7th month of pregnancy, Jennifer had some complications and needed bed rest. Immediately, their cooperative family mobilized to care for her. Margaret temporarily moved into David and Jennifer's house to watch over her daughter-in-law around the clock. Dorothy took shifts with her. Ashley took over some of Jennifer's tutoring classes. Jason helped David with household chores he didn't know how to do. "You don't have to do all this," Jennifer protested weakly. "Of course we do," Margaret replied. "You're our family, and family takes care of family. But you have your jobs, your lives." "Jennifer," Ashley interrupted, "when I was on the streets with nowhere to sleep, you gave me a home. When Emma got sick, you paid for the hospital. When we needed an opportunity, you gave us one. Now it's our turn to give back." Jennifer was moved by the young woman's words. "I never thought I'd have such a big, close-knit family." "Neither did I," David admitted. "I always thought family was just parents and children, but I've learned family is whoever chooses to stand by you in tough times." During Jennifer's recovery period, David also had to slow down at work. He discovered that delegating responsibilities and trusting his team wasn't just possible, it was beneficial for everyone. "Mr. David," said his new administrative assistant Michael, "the company's numbers have improved significantly since you became less involved in day-to-day operations." "How so?" "People felt more valued when they gained more autonomy. The work environment improved, productivity increased." David reflected on this. Had his excessive control been doing more harm than good? "Michael, do you think I was too controlling as a boss?" "Can I be honest, sir?" "Of course. You were, yes. But you've changed a lot these past few months. You've become more human, closer to people." "And did that make a difference?" "All the difference in the world. Before, people worked because they had to. Now they work because they want to, because they feel part of something bigger." David realized the changes in his personal life had positively impacted his professional life too. By the 8th month of pregnancy, Jennifer had been cleared by the doctor for normal activities. The birth was expected in a month, and everyone was eager. "David, have you thought of a name?" Margaret asked. "We want to wait until the baby's born to decide," Jennifer replied. "But we have some options." "Like what?" "If it's a boy, maybe Ethan or William. If it's a girl, maybe Margaret or Mary." Margaret was moved to hear her name on the list. "You'd give me that honor." "Of course, Mom. You changed our lives. It's only fair." Emma, listening in, chimed in. "What if you use my name too? Emma Margaret or Margaret Emma?" "Could be." Jennifer smiled. "We'll see when the baby comes." David asked. "You think it's a girl?" "I'm sure," Emma said with a child's certainty. "I dreamed about her last night. She's a girl with hair just like Aunt Jennifer's and eyes like Uncle David's." 2 weeks later, in the early hours of a Monday, Jennifer went into labor. David took her to the hospital with Margaret, while the others stayed home to finish preparations. The delivery went smoothly. At 6:32 a.m., Margaret Emma Thompson was born, a healthy girl, 7 LEBs and 19 inches. "She's beautiful," Margaret said, cradling her granddaughter. "Just like Jennifer." "But she has David's eyes," the nurse observed. When David held his daughter for the first time, he felt an emotion he'd never experienced before. It was unconditional love, protection, responsibility, and gratitude all at once. "Hi, princess," he whispered to the baby. "Mommy and Daddy love you so much, and you have the most special family in the world waiting for you at home." Jennifer watched her husband with their daughter and remembered his words from months earlier. "Sometimes you have to get lost to find yourself." "David, are you happy?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible," he answered without taking his eyes off their daughter. "Even with all this radical change in our lives?" "Mainly because of this change. If we hadn't found my mother that day, none of this would have happened." "Do you regret anything?" "I regret taking so long to find the right path, but I don't regret anything that happened after." When they came home with the baby, the whole family from the cooperative was waiting. Ashley had decorated the house with balloons and banners. Dorothy had prepared a special lunch. Jason had hung a musical mobile over the crib. Mr. Richard had predicted that the baby would be the first of many children to grow up in that community. "Aunt Jennifer, can I hold her?" asked Emma. "Of course, but be careful." Emma held the baby with all the care in the world and began talking to her. "Hi, Margaret Emma. I'm your cousin, Emma Margaret." "Isn't that confusing?" she laughed. "I'll teach you everything I know. You're going to grow up in a very special family, you know." David watched the scene and felt his heart overflow with gratitude. His daughter truly had the most special family in the world. In the following months, Margaret Emma became the center of attention in the house. Everyone competed over who would hold her, who would give her the bottle, who would change her diaper. "You're going to spoil this girl rotten," Jennifer complained, laughing. "Let her be spoiled," said Margaret. "Children need to feel loved, but she can't get too used to it. Jennifer, there's a difference between spoiling out of laziness and loving with dedication. We love with dedication." David agreed with his mother. Seeing how every person in the house cared for his daughter with genuine affection, he understood that this child was growing up surrounded by examples of generosity, patience, and love. When Margaret Emma turned 6 months old, the cooperative threw a party to celebrate. They invited all the neighbors, the local shopkeepers who always helped, Dr. Wilson, Mrs. Johnson, and others who had become part of their support network. "Everyone," David gave a speech during the party. "A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be here today, celebrating my daughter's birthday in a house full of people I didn't even know, I'd have said it was impossible." The crowd listened in silence. But life has taught me that the best gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. When I found my mother in that square, I thought it was a tragedy. Today, I know it was the greatest gift I could have received. Margaret wiped a tear from her eye. "Because through her, I met all of you. And through you, I found myself again. I learned that money doesn't bring happiness, but generosity does. I learned that family isn't just blood, it's a choice. I learned that true success isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by what we do for others." The audience applauded, moved. "And now my daughter will grow up learning these lessons from the start. She'll grow up knowing she has grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who love her not out of obligation, but by choice. She'll grow up in a place where helping others is natural, where sharing is more important than hoarding." Jennifer walked up to her husband with the baby in her arms. "She'll grow up knowing family is so much more than just parents and children. Family is who stands by you in hard times, who celebrates your victories, who accepts you as you are." Ashley shouted from the crowd, "Margaret Emma has the biggest family in New York City." Everyone laughed and clapped. Emma, now 9 years old, climbed onto a chair to speak. "Everyone, I want to say something important. When I first came to this square, I had no one, just my mom. But Mrs. Margaret taught me that we can choose our family. Today, I have Grandma Margaret, Uncle David, Aunt Jennifer, Uncle Jason, Aunt Ashley, Grandpa Richard, and a beautiful baby sister." The girl stepped down and went to the crib where Margaret Emma lay. "Little sister, you were born into the luckiest family in the world." It might not seem like a normal family, but it's the best family there is. David watched the girl talking to his daughter and realized Emma was right. That wasn't a conventional family, but it was perfect just the way it was. After the party, when everyone had gone to bed, David and Jennifer stayed in the living room talking. "David, are you happy with the choices we've made?" "Completely. And you?" "Me too. But sometimes I wonder if we've made our lives too complicated." "How so?" "Before, it was just the two of us. Now we're responsible for 8 people, a cooperative, a daughter. Jennifer, would you rather go back to how things were before?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "No, definitely not. Before, we had comfort, but we didn't have purpose. Now we have purpose. And is purpose more important than comfort?" "Much more. You get used to comfort. Purpose makes you wake up excited to live every morning." David agreed. It had been months since he'd needed an alarm clock. He woke up naturally, eager for another day, taking care of the family, the cooperative, the business. "Jennifer, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If we hadn't been able to have a child, do you think you'd still be happy?" "I would. Because when you have a family as big as ours, one more or one less child doesn't change the love we feel." "But you always wanted to be a mother." "And I am a mother, David. I'm Margaret, Emma's mother, but I'm also a little bit of a mother to Emma, to Ashley. Motherhood isn't just about having a child. Motherhood is about caring, protecting, teaching, loving." David looked at his wife with admiration. How had she become such a wise woman? "Jennifer, I love you. I love you too, but now I love you differently." "How so?" "Before I loved you despite your flaws. Now I love you, including the qualities I didn't even know you had." They kissed and went to sleep, grateful to have found their way back to each other and to a meaningful life. 2 years later, David was at the cooperative helping Jason with the accounting when Ashley came running in. Uncle David, you have to see this." "What is it, Ashley?" "The news story about our cooperative is going to be on TV." David rushed to the room where everyone was gathered around the television. The reporter was interviewing Margaret. "Mrs. Margaret, how did the idea for the cooperative come about?" "Honestly, the cooperative came from necessity. We were a group of people supporting each other on the streets, and when we got a home, we decided to keep working together." "And how does the family participate in the project?" "My son David and my daughter-in-law Jennifer gave us the opportunity, but we're the ones who make the cooperative work. Everyone contributes with their talents and experience." "What makes your cooperative unique?" "What makes us unique is that we work as a family. We're not just partners. We're a family that decided to build something together." David felt proud of his mother's answer. She had managed to explain in just a few words what made them special. The news segment showed each area of the cooperative: Ashley's thrift store, Jason's workshop, Dorothy's kitchen, Margaret's sewing studio, Jennifer's tutoring space. "And what are your plans for the future?" "We want to expand to help other families in situations like ours, to show that it's possible to start over at any age, to turn hardships into opportunities." When the segment ended, everyone clapped, moved. "Grandma Margaret is famous," Emma shouted. "Now everyone will know about our cooperative," Ashley said excitedly. And indeed, after the news story, the cooperative received many visitors, people interested in learning about the project, entrepreneurs wanting to understand the model, families in similar situations looking for inspiration. "Mom, you've become a celebrity," David joked. "Don't exaggerate, son, I just told our story." "But our story inspired so many people. All stories of overcoming hardship inspire, David. The problem is not everyone has the courage to share them." David reflected on his mother's words. How many inspiring stories were happening around them without anyone knowing? A few months after the article was published, David received an unexpected call. "Hello, David. This is Robert Anderson from the Social Development Foundation." "Hi, Robert. How can I help?" "Actually, we want to help you. We saw the article about your cooperative and were very interested in the model." "Interested how?" "We'd like to propose a partnership. You could replicate the model in other communities, and we'd provide technical and financial support." David was surprised by the offer. "Let me get this straight. You want us to help other families create cooperatives like ours? Exactly. You've proven the model works. Now we want to scale it. I need to discuss this with my family, and I'll get back to you. That night, David gathered everyone to discuss the proposal. Opinions were divided. I think we should accept, said Ashley. We could help so many families. But what if we can't handle it? Dorothy worried. What if it jeopardizes our own project? We could start small, Jason suggested. Help one family at a time. What do you think, Mom? David asked Margaret. Son, ever since I arrived in that square, my goal has always been to help others. If we can expand that help, why not? And you, Jennifer? I think we have enough experience to share, but it has to be on our terms, without losing our essence. After a long discussion, they decided to accept the proposal, but with conditions. They would help one family at a time, maintaining close contact and respecting each situation's uniqueness. The first project was with a family of 5 who had lost their home in a fire. David and Jennifer bought a smaller house on the outskirts, and everyone in the cooperative pitched in to help the new family get settled. It's like our family is growing again, Margaret observed. It's not just like it is growing, David corrected. Within 6 months, the new family had their own cooperative up and running, a community bakery serving the whole neighborhood. Uncle David, said Emma, now 11, how many families are we going to help? As many as we can within our means. And will Emma Margaret grow up helping other families too? David looked at his daughter, now 2.5, who already showed signs of generosity, always wanting to share her toys with other kids. She will. She'll grow up knowing that helping others is natural. Just like I learned from you? Just like you learned from us. Emma smiled, satisfied. So she'll be another aunt to other kids? Absolutely. That evening, David was in the backyard watching Emma Margaret play when Jennifer joined him. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about how our lives completely changed in 3 years. For the better? Infinitely for the better, but it's more than that. What else? I'm thinking about how many people struggled because I was too selfish to help. How many chances to make a difference I missed. David, you can't blame yourself for the past. It's not blame, Jennifer. It's awareness. Awareness that I could have started helping much sooner. Better late than never. True. But imagine if I'd started at 20 instead of 42. How many families could we have helped? Jennifer considered her husband's words. Maybe you weren't ready at 20. Maybe you needed to go through everything you did to get where you are now. You think so? I'm sure of it. If you were the same person at 20 as you are today, your life would have been completely different, and not necessarily better. How so? David, you had to learn how to make money before you could learn how to use it to help others. You had to build a solid financial foundation before you could support social projects. You had to lose your way to understand the value of finding yourself. David agreed that his wife was right. Every experience, every mistake, every success had been necessary to reach this point. Jennifer, do you think our daughter will make the same mistakes I did? I hope not. But if she does, she'll have a solid foundation to find her way back. What foundation? A family that loves her unconditionally and will always be here to support her. David looked around and saw Margaret putting Emma to sleep, Ashley helping Emma with her homework, Jason fixing a broken toy, Dorothy preparing the evening snack, Mr. Richard organizing the cooperative's paperwork. It was an unconventional family, but it was perfect. 5 years after their first meeting in the park, David was in his office when he got a call from Emma's school. Mr. David, this is Emma's teacher. David's heart raced. Calls from school were never good news. Hello, teacher. Is something wrong? Actually, I wanted to congratulate you. Congratulate me. Your daughter did something very kind today. There was a new girl in class, very shy, eating lunch alone. Emma took her snack and shared it with her. David smiled. And that's worth a call? Yes, because when I asked her why she did it, she said, my family taught me that we always share what we have with those in need. Oh, I see. Mr. David, in 20 years of teaching, I rarely see children so generous and empathetic. You should be proud of how you're raising her. When David hung up, his eyes filled with tears. His daughter, at just 5 years old, had already internalized values that took him 42 years to learn. That night at dinner, David told everyone about the call. "Margaret Emma, did you share your snack with a little friend today?" "I did, Daddy. She was sad because she had no one to play with." "And why did you decide to share?" "Because Grandma Margaret always says, when we have something good, we should share it with those who don't." Margaret smiled proudly at her granddaughter. "And did it work? Did the girl cheer up?" "Yes, and now we're friends. Tomorrow she's having lunch with me again." David looked at his daughter with admiration. At just 5, she already knew instinctively that generosity builds bonds and that sharing multiplies joy. "Sweetheart, you did really well. Daddy's proud of you." Aunt Emma always says when we help someone, we feel happier too. Emma, now 16 and preparing for college, hugged her little sister. "It's true, kiddo. When we do good, we feel good too." "Aunt Emma, what do you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to work in social work. I want to help families like our cooperative does." David wasn't surprised. Emma had grown up seeing examples of solidarity and had chosen to make it her life's work. "And you, Margaret Emma? What do you want to be?" "I want to be like Grandma Margaret. I want to take care of everyone." Margaret wiped a tear from her eye. "My sweet girl, you already take care of everyone. Whenever someone's sad, you're there with a hug. It's because I learned from you, Grandma." That night, as he was putting Margaret Emma to bed, David talked to his daughter about the importance of helping others. "Daddy, why don't some people help those in need?" The question caught David by surprise. How could he explain to a 5-year-old something it had taken him decades to understand? "Sweetheart, sometimes people get so caught up in their own problems that they forget to look around." "But helping isn't hard, you just share, right?" "You're right, it's not hard. But sometimes people are afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid they won't have enough for themselves." Margaret Emma thought for a moment. "But when you share, you don't end up with less, you end up with more joy." David was moved by his daughter's wisdom. "That's true, sweetheart. When you share, you end up with more joy." "Then why are people afraid?" "Because they haven't learned what you already know." "Can I teach them?" "Of course. Just like you did today at school, by showing through actions." "Okay, Daddy. I'll teach everyone to share." David kissed his daughter's forehead and turned off the light. As he left the room, he found Jennifer in the hallway. "Did you hear the conversation?" "I did. Our daughter is amazing. She's the result of everything we've learned, of the family we've built." "David, do you think we succeeded? Did we raise a better person?" "Jennifer, at 5 years old, she's already more generous than I was at 40. So yes, we did." They walked to the living room where Margaret was knitting another little outfit for donation. "Mom, did you hear Margaret Emma talking about sharing her snack?" "I did," Margaret smiled. "She's just like you when you were little." "How so?" "You always shared your things with other kids too, until you grew up and forgot about it." "Why did I forget?" "Because the world taught you that sharing was dangerous, that you might end up with nothing if you gave too much." "And now?" "Now you've remembered that when we share with love, we always end up with more than we had before." David reflected on his mother's words. It was true. The more he gave, the more he received in return, not necessarily in money, but in satisfaction, purpose, and meaningful relationships. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, son." "Do you regret anything in your life?" Margaret stopped knitting and looked at her son. "I regret letting your father hurt me so much that I ended up pushing you away from him." "What do you mean?" "When your father left us, I was so afraid you'd suffer like I did, that I tried to protect you too much. Maybe that's why you grew up afraid to trust people." David had never thought of it that way. "Do you think that's why I became so closed off?" "I think it was one of the reasons, but son, everyone reacts differently to hardships. You reacted by protecting yourself. I reacted by dedicating myself to others. Which reaction was better? Neither was completely right or wrong. You needed to protect yourself to grow stronger. I needed to give to avoid bitterness. What matters is that in the end, we both found balance." "What balance?" You learn to give without losing yourself. I learned to take care of myself without stopping to care for others." David agreed. Over the past few years, he'd found the right balance between generosity and self-care, between helping others and maintaining his own stability. 10 years after their first meeting in the square, the cooperative had grown into a network of 15 families spread across New York City. Each maintained their independence, but all supported one another. David, now 52, had sold part of his business to dedicate himself fully to social projects. Jennifer had opened a community school serving 200 children from the outskirts. Margaret Emma, at 12, was a socially engaged teenager who spent her weekends helping with the cooperative network's activities. Emma had graduated in social work and was officially working as the project coordinator. Margaret, now 80 years old, remained the matriarch of the entire network, visiting each cooperative regularly, offering advice and emotional support. "Mom," David said one Sunday afternoon, "did you ever imagine that meeting in the square would lead to all this?" "I never imagined it," Margaret admitted. "I just wanted to survive one day at a time." "And today?" "Today I see that every hardship I went through was necessary to get here." "Do you think it was worth spending 3 years on the street?" Margaret reflected on the question. "Son, I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone. But if I hadn't gone through it, you would never have found me. And if you hadn't found me, none of this would exist." David looked around the house, which now served as the coordination center for the network. People were constantly coming and going. Meetings were happening in every room and children played in the backyard. "Sometimes I wonder how many stories like ours are waiting to happen." "What do you mean?" "How many families could form? How many projects could start? How many lives could change if people stopped to help when they see someone in need?" "David, you can't save everyone." "I know, but I can inspire others to save someone. And you already do that. Every family we help inspires other families. It's a chain reaction." David smiled. His mother was right. They weren't just helping families one by one. They were creating a culture of solidarity that spread naturally. That evening, during the community dinner held every Sunday, David looked around the table and counted 23 people. 3 generations, from various backgrounds, united not by blood, but by the choice to be family. Margaret Emma, sitting next to her grandfather, Mr. Richard, asked, "Grandpa Richard, do you remember what our life was like before we met Dad and Mom?" "I do, my dear. It was harder, but we were happy anyway." "How could we be happy if it was harder?" "Because happiness doesn't depend on what we have, but on who we have beside us. And now we have more people beside us. Now we have a huge family. And when the family is big, happiness grows too." David watched the conversation between Margaret Emma and Mr. Richard and felt emotional. His daughter was growing up hearing stories of resilience, examples of gratitude, and life lessons no formal school could teach. After dinner, as everyone gathered in the living room, David asked for their attention. "Everyone, I want to say something to you." They all stopped to listen. 10 years ago, when I found my mother in that square, I thought I was saving her. Today, I know she was the one who saved me. Margaret tried to protest, but David continued. "She saved me from an empty life, from a failing marriage, from an existence without purpose. She taught me again what I'd forgotten, that life only makes sense when we live for something bigger than ourselves." "Son, you're exaggerating." "I'm not, Mom. And I want everyone to know that this family, this network, all these projects exist because a 70-year-old woman had the courage to start over on the streets instead of giving up on life." The room fell into an emotional silence. "And I want everyone to know that if we manage to build all this, anyone can build something similar. You just need the courage to reach out to those in need." Ashley, now 32 and the coordinator of one of the cooperatives, spoke up. "Uncle David, can I say something?" "Of course, Ashley." "When I was 22 and on the streets, I thought my life was over, that I'd never get out of that situation. And now? Now I run a cooperative that helps others leave the same situation I was in. I have a family that loves me. I have purpose. I have a future. And what changed? What changed was that someone believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself anymore. David felt his heart tighten with emotion. Ashley, you always had potential. We just gave you an opportunity. Uncle David, everyone has potential. What not everyone has is opportunity. And you gave me that. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Margaret Emma, who had gone out to play in the backyard. Daddy, there's a lady at the door asking for Grandma Margaret. What lady, sweetheart? An older lady with a little bag. She said she saw the story about Grandma on TV. Margaret got up to answer the door. She returned a few minutes later with a visibly nervous woman around 75 years old. Everyone, this is Mrs. Patricia. She came from Tampa to meet us. Good evening, everyone, the woman greeted. I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday night. Don't worry, Mrs. Patricia, David said, stepping forward. Our home is always open. How can we help? I saw the story about you on TV, how a family formed on the streets and managed to rebuild their lives together. And you're interested in the project? Actually, Mrs. Patricia hesitated. I'm in a situation similar to what Mrs. Margaret was in 10 years ago. Margaret moved closer to the woman. What happened, Patricia? I lost my home 6 months ago. My children live abroad and don't know about my situation. I've been staying in a shelter, but it's very hard. Margaret took the woman's hand. Do you have any income? I have my pension, but it's not enough to rent a place. David looked at Jennifer, who nodded in agreement. Mrs. Patricia, would you like to stay here with us for a few days while we figure out how to help you? You'd do that, even without knowing me? Mrs. Patricia, Margaret replied, 10 years ago, I was in your situation. If it weren't for people's generosity, I wouldn't be here today. But I don't want to be a burden. You wouldn't be a burden, Ashley interjected. You'd be an opportunity for us to give back what we've received. Mrs. Patricia began to cry. I can't believe there are still good people in this world. There are, said Margaret Emma, stepping closer. And now you're part of our family too. David watched the scene and felt a sense of déjà vu. 10 years later, they were once again welcoming someone in need. But this time, he didn't hesitate for even a second to offer help. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Patricia was already part of the household routine. They discovered she was a retired teacher with so much knowledge to share. Jennifer invited her to teach at the community school, and she eagerly accepted. Mrs. Patricia, David said, you've brought something very valuable to our family. What's that? Experience in education. We needed exactly that to expand our projects. Do you really think I can contribute? I'm sure of it, Jennifer replied. I've seen you with the kids. They adore you. It's just that I've always loved teaching. After I retired, I missed the classroom so much. Then it was meant to be that you found us, Margaret said. David agreed. Once again, what seemed like a problem had turned into an opportunity for everyone to grow. By the end of that year, David reflected on everything they'd accomplished. Their network of cooperatives was now directly supporting over 100 families and positively impacting the entire region they served. Jennifer, do you think we've done it? Made a difference? David, look around us. Look at how many lives have changed. Of course we've done it. But sometimes I feel it's not enough compared to all the need in the world. David, we can't solve all the world's problems, but we can solve the problems of the people who come to us. What if more people come than we can help? Then we teach them to help each other, just like your mother taught us. David reflected on his wife's words. Margaret had truly been their greatest teacher, not through speeches or theories, but through the living example of how to live a life of service to others. Jennifer, do you think our daughter will continue this work when she grows up? I think she'll follow her heart. If she continues, great. If she does something else, that's great too. What do you mean? David, what matters isn't that she does exactly what we do. What matters is that she carries on the values we taught her: generosity, empathy, solidarity. You're right. She can apply those values in any area of life. Exactly. She could be a doctor treating patients in need. She could be a lawyer defending social causes. She could be a businesswoman creating jobs. What matters is using her talents to do good for others. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about everything that had happened since that day in the square 10 years earlier. How a walk to clear his head had become the turning point of his life. He got up quietly and went to the backyard. The house was silent, but he knew that by morning it would once again be full of movement, people, projects, and life. "Can't sleep?" he heard his mother's voice behind him. "Mom, what are you doing awake?" "Same as you, thinking about life." Margaret sat beside her son on the backyard bench. "What were you thinking about?" "How funny destiny is. If I hadn't lost my home, if you hadn't argued with Jennifer that day, if you hadn't decided to take that walk, none of this would have happened," David finished. "Yeah, sometimes I wonder how many beautiful stories never happen because people don't stop to help when they see someone in need." "I think about that too, Mom. But you know what I think about even more?" "What?" "That our story might inspire others to stop and help. And then those other stories will happen too." David smiled. His mother always saw the bright side of things. "Mom, can I tell you something?" "Of course, son. I love you, and I'm grateful for everything you've taught me." "Son, you don't have to thank me. I'm your mother. Teaching you was my job." "It was more than that, Mom. You taught me so much more than a mother's duties. You taught me how to be a better person." Margaret took her son's hand. "David, you've always been a good person. You were just lost. I just helped you find your way." "And how did you always know I'd find my way?" "Because I raised you. I know what you're capable of when you're on the right path." "What if I hadn't found you that day?" "You would have found me another way, or found someone else who needed help. Because when we're ready to change, life always sends an opportunity." David pondered his mother's words. Was she right? Was that meeting in the square inevitable? "Mom, do you think everything in life happens for a reason?" "I think everything in life happens, and it's up to us to decide what meaning to give it." "What do you mean?" "We can use what happens to grow or to shrink, to help others or to close ourselves off. The choice is ours." David agreed. He could have found his mother on the street, paid for a hotel, superficially fixed the situation, and returned to his empty life. But he chose to get involved, chose to learn, chose to change. "Mom, do you have any regrets in life?" "I do." "What?" "I regret not having the courage to ask for help sooner. I spent 3 years on the streets when I could have reached out to you earlier in other ways." David was surprised by the response. "But you did try to reach me." "I tried, but I didn't insist enough. I let pride speak louder than need." "And what would you have done differently?" "I would have been more persistent. I would have found a way past your staff's block." "Mom, maybe it just wasn't the right time yet. Maybe I wasn't ready to listen." "Could be, but I still wonder how many people don't ask for help out of pride and how many miss out on help for lack of persistence." His mother's observation made David think. How many situations could be resolved if people were more direct in asking for help and more attentive in offering it? "Mom, how can we teach this to others?" "By doing, David. By showing that asking for help isn't shameful and that giving help isn't an obligation. It's a privilege." "A privilege?" "Son, when you help someone, who feels better, the helper or the one being helped?" David considered the question. "Honestly, the helper." "Exactly. So helping is more of a gift we give ourselves than to others." "I'd never thought of it that way." "Think about it now. Do you feel good when you help someone?" "I feel great." "Then when you help someone, you're doing yourself a favor." David laughed at his mother's logic. "Mom, you always have a different way of seeing things. When you've lived long enough, you realize things aren't always what they seem." They fell silent for a few minutes, just watching the starry sky. "Mom, are you happy?" "Happier than I ever thought possible at 80. "Why?" "Because I have a big family, I have purpose, I have the health to keep helping people. What more could I want?" "Nothing, right?" "Nothing. In fact, sometimes I'm even afraid of being too happy." "Why afraid?" "Because when you're too happy, you always fear something bad might happen to balance it out." David understood his mother's feeling. He sometimes felt that insecurity too. "But Mum, don't you think we deserve to be happy after all we've been through?" "We do deserve it, but so does everyone, and not everyone gets to be. So we should enjoy it while it lasts." We should enjoy it and try to spread that happiness to those who can't find it on their own. David smiled. His mother could never think only of herself. Even talking about her own happiness, she was already thinking of how to share it. Mom, do you think our story will have a happy ending? David, our story doesn't have an ending. It continues every day. How so? Every person we help writes a new chapter. Every family that forms writes a new chapter. Every child who grows up with values of solidarity writes a new chapter. So our story is endless? Our story is endless. David was moved by his mother's perspective. They weren't just living their own lives, they were contributing to a much bigger story. Mom, thank you. For what? For teaching me life can be so much more than I imagined. Margaret kissed her son's forehead. Son, thank you for stopping in that square 10 years ago. Thank you for what? For giving me the chance to be useful again. For giving me a family. For giving me reasons to keep living. They embraced there in the backyard under the starry sky, grateful for all the paths that led them to that moment. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story. Do you believe small acts of kindness can transform entire lives? How many opportunities to help someone go unnoticed in our daily lives? Leave your thoughts in the comments and share if you've ever experienced or witnessed a similar situation. Your interaction means so much to us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories that may touch your heart and make you reflect on the true meaning of family and generosity.